Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Agency Operators Podcast. Today I'm joined by Michelle Kartchner of Ascendant Brand. How are you doing, Michelle?
Good. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm really excited to talk to you today. I think you've done something pretty incredible, and I'm seeing this model come up more and more, and I'm so fascinated by it. This whole kind of idea of going from, first of all, seller, then
Hmm.
provider, and then portfolio company, right? There's a pretty interesting gap of things that kind of happen in between those two things. So I'd love to hear about your story and speak a little bit about that experience and maybe how one might build their own portfolio of brands, sort of modeling maybe a little bit after all of the aggregates that we saw kind of go down and how we can not repeat their mistakes and be successful at it, maybe not borrow too much money that we can't pay back, like that. So yeah, happy to have you on the show, Michelle. So please, if you can share a little bit about your history and kind of what got you started with Scale and into Ascendant.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm happy to be here. So in 2017, I joined a very large Amazon third party retailer named Buyboxer. At the time, they were one of the biggest in the industry, definitely the largest by assortment size. And it was very exciting. It was a crazy time to be on Amazon. In 2017, brands just wanted help getting on Amazon. They didn't care about control, they didn't care about brand registry. Like there were all these things that just weren't even in their, you know, sphere of what do we do with this? And so it was a lot like the wild wild west. I know a lot of people compare it to that in 2017 because it was just a free for all. Everyone was selling all these brands, and it was just kind of who could get control of the buy box, who could do, who could make adjustments to the content the best and the quickest. And it was just a very strange place to be. And in 2019, we saw a shift in the Amazon landscape, which was more and more brands cared about Amazon, and they cared about having control, and they wanted to be the seller of record, for multiple reasons, but primarily it invokes a level of trust with the consumer, knowing that they're buying directly from the brand and not from XYZ seller. And so in 2019, we started taking on clients and approaching our existing book of business and saying, hey, this is what we're seeing. Do you want us to set this up for you and get this going? And after doing that for about 6 months, we fully launched what was then called Buy Boxer Services and is now called Scale Strategy, which is an Amazon agency that's still very much alive and well and doing very well today. But so that was kind of a whirlwind in and of itself. And then in 2020, before the whole world shut down, one of our clients that we had worked with a long time, we'd been managing their Amazon account since 2016. He wanted to retire. He was in his 70s. He had developed a fantastic product, and we loved the brand. It was overall very well put together for Amazon specifically, and we knew it had a lot more potential for growth. And so at the time, our primary owner said, yeah, let's try it out. And so myself and one of our other co-founders set out to acquire this brand with our primary owner. And later that year, one of our other clients that I had worked with for a long time, they were my client for a couple of years. It was a little bit of a different situation. It wasn't someone that wanted to retire. It was a situation where this brand had been passed down to another generation, and that generation had ran it for a couple of decades and was ready to be done with it and kind of let things fall by the wayside. And we actually picked up that brand at auction. So if we didn't get that brand, we were actually going to lose a major client of ours that had tons of, they were doing a couple million on Amazon. They were big, and he was going to let it just kind of dissolve. And so, we were lucky. We picked up the general manager, who was my contact at the time, and he became our fourth co-founder of Ascendant as we acquired that brand. And from there, we acquired four more. We've sold one of the six that we have acquired, and so we have five brands in our portfolio today.
Very cool. And so, how did you find the remainder? Yeah.
Variety of places. One is, so we're local to Utah. Most of our team, at least at the time we were. Now we're probably 50-50 remote and in Utah. But most of the co-founders are from Utah. And so we do have one brand that was a Utah brand that we just discovered through connections. Um, and that one has been a good brand for us. Our smaller brands, I think, there's a lot of different message boards and all sorts of things if you're looking to acquire brands that you can find different things like that on. And I think our owner found a couple of our small brands that way, just kind of searching brands to acquire and seeing kind of what was out there, people in his network, people in my network, et cetera, and just seeing what opportunities were there. There's a lot of brands we didn't acquire that we got down the process and, doing our due diligence and realized it wouldn't be a good fit for us. And so, yeah, that's kind of how we found the ones we have.
And would you say that it makes sense, like if someone wanted to kind of build out this type of portfolio for themselves, is it good to go after the ones that are like real gems, like really one of a kind, they have a lot of like that kind of moat around them? Or in other cases, what I see is people are looking for those kind of desperate sellers who are ready to sell for a 1x just to exit their business and not lose more money on inventory, or whatever it is. So they're just selling it at cost basically, or maybe combination of the two.
Yeah, I think that totally depends on what you want your business model to be. At Ascendant, from the very beginning, we set out with our mission to be renewal of our people, meaning we take care of our people, we make sure that they have, a good work life balance. Renewal of brands. So we were actually targeting brands that had been very successful at one point and maybe kind of fallen down, but we knew they still had a lot of potential. And so especially in the Amazon sphere, we wanted to make sure that they had untapped potential in that space specifically. So most of our brands were actually more wholesale native brands. So they had been more popular in like big box retailers or things like that, and less so in the D2C space. But we knew that that was kind of a wide open field for us to play in. So that was what we looked for specifically when we were acquiring. Our fourth acquisition, which was our Utah brand, they were actually our first one that was more D2C native, and we actually did acquire that one specifically because we wanted to round out more of our skills with Shopify and stuff, and not just Amazon. And so that created a really good opportunity for us because they were just such a strong Shopify brand already. And so I think it just depends on what your skill set is as a team or as an individual, if it's just one person doing it, and what you want your story to be. We really liked that idea of taking something that was special and bringing it back to life.
That's
So
super cool. Like the fact that they have all that external exposure, maybe social media and retail and everything, like people are already looking for it, right? And if they're not taking advantage of the e-com side and you already have all that process built out, I can see how that's a very strategic way to win pretty quickly, right? Like you can just fill in that gap, immediately recover whatever you spent or big chunk of it. So I
yeah.
can see the ROI value there. So talk to me about financing. So, a little bit about, there's SBA as one option. I've
Mhm.
seen that. Or I've seen people that partner with some type of VC,
Venture
or,
capital. Yeah.
yeah, they have some type of capital group that's backing them. And then you already have your agency for the operation. So that's sort of, covered in-house. You get that at cost value, of course. So really like the big expense is just buying the business and funding the inventory.
Hmm.
How do you guys manage that, especially when you already have like five or six in the portfolio?
Yeah. I mean, I think financing is where a lot of people can get into trouble.
Yeah,
That's what we saw a lot with the big aggregators that were gobbling up brands left and right. And then I don't know kind of what happened to them later. Um, so yes, there's a lot of options. It depends on the owner. So our
hmm
primary owner was able to fund some of it. We were able to get SBA loans for some of it. We did have one kind of VC firm that backed us in 2023, I believe. So we've had a variety of financing and things like that. And so, and from a inventory standpoint, we have a fantastic CFO. He's very creative with funding and stuff, but there are lots of different creative solutions out there for, say, inventory procurement and things like that. There are specific financing groups that will just fund your inventory with favorable terms. So that way you can get the inventory here and then pay them off. So there's a lot of options, I guess, is what it boils down to. SBA is a really great program if you can qualify and get the money ahead of time using SBA. That is definitely, I think, the preferred way to do it. If you
Is
don't
it
have the money yourself.
Yeah, is it possible that the brand doesn't qualify? So I understand that like they're trying to get SBA funding for your brand and not for their organization. Is that right? That they're kind of applying as you, or they're like,
No.
is there a limitation? Because SBA will only give you so much money, and so
Yes.
if you're trying to acquire something new, then you can't like reuse that again, right?
I'm not the foremost expert on this. I can say that right now. I was not very much involved in our finances. I do know that there has been a few changes to the SBA rules in the last 6 months, 8 months,
Oh,
with the current administration. There has been a few changes. I've heard other people have issues if they're, say they have a minority ownership that is someone that's not a US citizen, they're no longer able to get an SBA loan. If you have any loans that are short-term loans, you're no longer eligible for an SBA loan. So there's a lot of different things now that there weren't, say, 5 years ago, or it's just different. I think, depending on what's going on in the economy and other factors, the requirements change a bit. So um, I'm not sure exactly what the requirements were in 2022 and 2020 when we were doing most of the acquisitions. Um, I will say, so Ascendant is the parent company, but each of these entities, each of these brands are their own entity as well.
hmm.
So they're all owned by the parent, but they're all their own entity. So like all of the loans and everything we do are at the brand level, not the parent as much.
Yeah, and like you said, the finances are such a beast of them. Like I can totally imagine that there's so much to juggle just between all of like the payment schedules and making sure
Mhm.
that everything lines up and matches. And there might be even like some intercompany borrowing at some point. I
Yes,
imagine like
there is.
why would you go and take a loan at a percent, right? If you
Mhm.
can just give money from one brand to another if it's sitting there. So I guess like that's when like the flywheel starts to really spin. Like I imagine that some of the
Yeah.
first acquisitions really start to grow, generate a lot more money. They can
Yeah, and
start
fund
paying.
the others. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
and that just continues until this is my next question is like exit. I think
Mm.
that once you exit the first one, if you make a big profit, then that could probably potentially fund even the acquisitions or just help to buy even more inventory. What's the game plan when it comes to exit? Is there like a certain amount of years that you want to hold on or a certain number that you guys are after?
Yeah, so we made one exit last year, and it was our last brand that we had acquired. It was one that required us to do kind of our own manufacturing, which we are. I come from my background besides Amazon prior to that was in supply chain and sourcing for manufacturing. So I have some experience there, but we, are not manufacturers by nature. And so that one just ended up not being the best fit for us. And so it made sense for us to find another owner that could run that brand. Um, we we had when we first started out, we've changed directions a few times. At one point, we were looking to exit more brands. It was kind of the idea to say, flip brands. We were going to acquire some brands, we were going to fix them up, bring them back to life, and then maybe offload them to someone that could take them to the next level that we can't. In 2022, one of those 2 years, we set out to try to exit one of our brands, our first acquisition, and we went out into the market, and it was, it did well, but then the problem is that brand started performing extremely well, like higher than even our plan numbers were. And so we were like, do we offload this now or do we hold on to it? Because, now it's generating a lot of cash. So we ended up making the decision to hold on to it. And we do still have it today. And after that experience, we kind of, that's when we changed from becoming, we were kind of more of an aggregator and became a holding company, meaning we don't really exit the brands anymore. And so we have exited the one, but it's not really in the in the current plans to exit others, but the plans always change.
So when it comes to exiting, I guess like with the current setup that you have, of course,
Mhm.
as it is today, is the idea maybe to exit the holding company as a whole versus selling off one brand at a time?
Potentially. Ultimately, that's up to our primary owner. Yes, I'm the CEO and I'm a co-founder, but our primary owner gets to make most of those decisions. So um, most of that depends on what he wants for his future and his legacy and all of those kind of things. So
Cool.
maybe, I guess
And
is the answer, the vague answer.
makes sense. Yeah, I mean, with business, it's always like that, right? Things change, circumstances change all the time, so you have
Well, and
to.
that's what's tricky. People were acquiring brands left and right a few years ago. It's much harder to sell brands right now in the economic landscape that we're in, the e-commerce landscape we're in. Like it's just a different time. And so it's hard to say what things will look like in 3 to 4 years if we're going to be in a place where it becomes, a better market to sell brands again. Uh, that would probably change, some of our direction. But right now, to give you an idea, like when we were acquiring some of these brands and looking to offload other brands, people were paying 3 to 5x EBITDA for a brand. Right now, you're probably looking at maybe two. Like, it's just not a great, and it probably depends on who you find. If it's someone that really is very passionate about your brand and really wants it and sees a lot of growth potential, maybe they'll still give you 3x. But just in our experience, when we tried to go back to market to sell a couple other brands, it had cooled off a lot, and it just wasn't the same opportunities that we saw um, back in like 2020 and 2021.
Do you think it's because of inflation or
Mhm.
simply just lack of certainty of the future and people are more conservative during these kind of times?
Yeah, I think it's both. I think that's also why we're seeing some, there's a lot of stress on e-commerce brands right now because people aren't spending as much money, unfortunately. So there's been a lot of layoffs and a lot of people not buying things, and that's kind of a vicious cycle because the more layoffs, the more people don't buy things, which mean more brands aren't doing well. So it's a tricky spot to be in for sure.
And in terms of operations to actually grow these brands,
Hmm.
what are some of the levers you guys are pulling? Is it international expansion? I know that, of course, if they don't have an Amazon presence or D2C presence, that's what you establish. But from there, is it kind of expand internationally or maybe expand the product line? Or is it maybe different because every brand is in a different category and has different customers?
It is somewhat different by brand, but we do quite a bit of product development, especially early on for the brands when we first acquired them. Myself and our VP of brand, we've done a lot of product development for our brands, and that's something that I actually really love doing. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to see something that you think up come to life.
Yeah.
It's something you had this idea of, and suddenly you're holding it in your hand. Um, it's a that's a fun part of brand building and owning a brand.
Yeah.
And so yes, product line expansion's a major one. And for two of our brands, we actually did a full rebrand as well within the first year of acquiring, which was very important for those brands. They were a little bit dated and needed just a facelift altogether. And so
Mhm.
that was another fun thing we did. It was, we took something that had been known, but just made it a little bit better. And so that was exciting. And one of our brands, our second acquisition, had a huge portfolio, like thousands of SKUs.
Wow.
And that one we actually trimmed the line to make more sense for us from a supply chain standpoint. That's a lot. It was say 20 vendors, and
Wow.
compared to our others, which are just a handful. So it's a different beast.
So
So that one's less product line expansion, more reduction.
I was gonna say, like, that must be a little bit scary, right? To have spent all this money to buy the brand, and then you make all these drastic changes. Is there like always like kind of in the back of your mind, like maybe this is not gonna work out, or this is gonna just like change the identity too much, where we're gonna lose customers?
Um, with our first brand, no, I had no hesitation. at that point we had been running that brand already for 5 or 6 years on Amazon. And so
Right.
I felt pretty confident in the decisions we were making. And it's a bracelet kit. And so when that product was first conceived back in 2008, the demographic that was using that, which are, 8 to 12-year-old girls, is quite different than 8 to 12-year-old girls were in 2020. So, like, they're just a lot more mature. 8 to 12-year-olds were still very, I think, girlish in the early 2000s. And by 2020, they're more little teenagers, right? Like
Hmm.
they want to become older. And so we aged it up a little bit more. We made it a little bit edgier, still youthful, but also just a little bit like verging on you, like they're going to be a teenager. And so I overall, and we did a lot of work with focus groups and things to make sure we're making the right choice. In case you're wondering, tweens hate the color Kelly green with a passion across the country, which was not something I knew. So definitely do your homework if you're going to make a big change like that. With our Utah native brand that we did do a rebrand, I was more nervous because it was such a strong brand on Instagram, such a strong brand on Shopify, like it was actually well known. And I was nervous, like, are we going to change the DNA of the company too much? But I think we landed in a pretty good spot. It was still familiar, but refreshed. Like I think we did a good job with it. And we hired experts. That's we're not shy to make sure that we hire out what we don't have the expertise to do ourselves. So
Experts in what?
for the rebrand, so like we hired an agency to actually assist us and come up with those designs.
Oh, great.
Yeah, yeah.
So kind of preserve the core essence of
Hmm.
what the brand stands for, but it's just make it a little bit more, like you said, fresh.
Yeah, yeah,
That's quite an art to do, right?
yeah. Yes,
It's a very sensitive thing.
yes.
So very
Yeah, so
nice.
that's worth hiring out. A lot of our operations we did in house. I handle a lot of our supply chain as well as our VP brand. We do all the product development in house, except for like engineering. We obviously hire that out as a contractor because we're not engineers, but um, most of it we do in house.
And my last question, if
Hmm.
somebody wanted to walk these footsteps and kind of follow in that whole, building a portfolio, is like kind of looking back at this whole experience, like what's like one piece of advice that you could give?
Hmm. Definitely make sure you do your homework on the brands. Do your due diligence. Don't rush the process. You need to make sure that it's really, really the brand for you. Um, Even if it's like your fifth brand, you still have to go through the same process. Like, is this really a fit culturally? Does it fit into our operations? Does it fit into our finances? Is it there's a lot of questions you have to ask yourself and really making sure that it's the right one. It's kind of like adopting a child in a lot of ways. Like
Yeah.
you're like, does this really fit into our family? Um, and just obviously with a child, it's not the best analogy because you don't know their personality and all these things like you would a brand, but um, still, it's very much like you're dedicating a lot of your time and a lot of your money and a lot of things to this brand. So if you're not 100% sure that this is it, back out. Like unless there's pen on paper, you can back out at any time. So
That's good advice. Michelle, I appreciate the nuggets of wisdom, nuggets of gold here. Thank you for
yeah,
sharing.
yeah. Thank you for having me.
All right. I'll catch everybody on the next one. Have a great day.
See ya.